Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. My name's Jack Ferguson, an evidence-based brand consultant, and I do this podcast for senior marketers and anybody interested in brand building so that you can feel seen, get ideas for stakeholder management and persuasion, and talk strategy. I release an episode every week. Sometimes it's a solo episode like today. Sometimes I co-host an episode with another senior marketer. But today I'm bringing you episode 54, and I'm going to talk about a few brands you may be familiar with today. I wanted to shake things up a little and talk about a few different approaches that various brands over the years have used to grow. And my intention for this episode is simply to help you to think out of the box a little bit more. I think sometimes we can get too dogmatic about how we build brands. So I thought I would bring you some rogue brand building strategies today. I hope these give you some new ideas. So one of the most interesting ones that I come across was from the dating app Bumble, which you may be familiar with. It's quite well known now, but it wasn't always well known, obviously. Like a lot of two-sided marketplaces, they had the cold start syndrome early on. So it's the type of business where you have to grow both sides of the marketplace at a relatively equal velocity. So assuming most users of the app were going to be heterosexual, there's no point having a lot of women on the app and no men, or vice versa. In fact, the opposite is more likely to be the bigger risk, where dating apps struggle with having too many men and not enough women on them. So how did they grow both sides of the marketplace simultaneously in the early days? Well, Whitney Wolfe Herd, who is the Bumble founder, is quoted as saying that in the early days, they would create posters and they'd put them around college campuses. And on those posters, it would say, no Facebook, no Snapchat, no Instagram, no Bumble, all with a big cross marked through each brand. Students would see this, obviously, and in typical university style or around that age, they would be like, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'll use these apps if I want to. But they also would have thought, what the hell's Bumble? I'm familiar with the other three, but what's this Bumble app? So the brand did a very clever job of positioning the app to be on par with the other well-known brands in these posters. To quote Wolfe Herd, she said, we would post these all over the universities. So there was this association where it was like, wait, I can't do the things I really want to do. I want to sit in class on Snapchat. I want to sit in class on Instagram. And what the hell is Bumble? She says they were essentially seeding a psychological curiosity. So very interesting. There was more to this strategy. So Bumble took the guerrilla approach, which it's sometimes referred to, one step further, and they would actually send young women or young men wearing Bumble t-shirts into classes 10 or 15 minutes late. These young people wearing the Bumble shirt would interrupt a class of 300 people and say, oh, sorry, wrong room. But while this is happening, everyone's looking at this young woman or young man and they're wearing a Bumble t-shirt, and it's giving that feel that Bumble is everywhere. They were sowing curiosity. I really appreciate the thought that went into this approach. Well, I assume the thought that went into this approach. They effectively didn't worry about all the usual tactics for getting known. And I suspect in this case, they thought more about a user's life rather than what media they consume. And this is where I think they really went right. So much of the time I hear about brands asking what media their prospects consume. But a better question is, and I think this goes at any stage of your growth, is what does our prospects week to week look like, or their month to month? What does their life look like? Let's understand their whole life better, not just their media habits. And that's what I think we can take from this. We can ask questions like, what is the culture amongst our users or customers or would-be users or would-be customers? And how can we insert ourselves into that culture? Are there cost-effective ways that we can increase the likelihood of our brand getting noticed and seen in a small community? There's things that I've done with clients for B2B products and services as well. So one thing I will often tell clients to do is if you're trying to get well known within a community, one thing I often have helped clients do is start off with a simple event. If the people that you're trying to get to are hard to get to and are unlikely to pay much attention to you, even if you could get to them, what you can do is put an event, cover the drinks for the event, sell the people that you're inviting along on the idea of meeting the other guests that come along to the event. So they come along because they want to meet the other guests. The other guests come along because they want to meet the other guests. And here you are inserting yourself into the equation beautifully. This isn't event marketing or any of that rubbish that people say. This is understanding a prospect's life and finding a way to insert yourself into it. Build a relationship, build awareness, and work out your next steps from there. Another rogue brand building story that I do love is from another brand that I'm sure you're familiar with, and that's Red Bull, the energy drink that sits on retailer shelves all over the world. But there are some interesting urban legends that circle about this brand and how they got their product moving. I'll preface this by saying that as I researched this topic, I found case studies about it. I found plenty of documentation, say in The Guardian, in Campaign, in strategic and business reports over the internet, but I didn't find anything from the company themselves saying that this definitely happened. But let's talk about it anyway, because it's an interesting story and I'm sure something we can learn regardless. So there's this idea that Red Bull in the early days would employ this strategy of putting empty cans in public places to make it look like a lot of people were consuming the product. So, for example, there's rumors that Red Bull would have their team throw empty cans in nightclubs and bins around Vienna, creating the illusion of popularity. Nightclub goers would see the cans in the bin and assume that everyone around them was buying the drink. And this is one way it's theorized that Red Bull built its original popularity. They also would have student brand managers hand out free samples to clubbers, athletes, DJs, skaters, not random consumers. So there's evidence that they would target, say, opinion leaders within micro tribes, not mass audiences. And to this day, I've seen Red Bull ambassadors set up in a public area and just give away product for free. So they still do things like this. So it's very plausible that this was a strategy they've used for a very long time. And I think the key here, especially now that they're well established, is that they should be random about it. So you don't want to build an expectation in the consumer that if they come down to the corner at 3 p.m. every Friday, they're going to get a can for free. But as a random thing to do, great idea. But I'd be guessing that for the most part, they're in the retention game. So they want people to buy multiple Red Bulls throughout their week or throughout their month, and spending some time giving out free products, activating new people and reactivating old customers to start drinking Red Bull again is probably a bargain. I've used a similar tactic from time to time when working with food brands. So in some hospitality categories, it is a good goal to get people to visit your establishment, say 3 times, and that's starting to instill a habit. So if you were, once someone leaves your restaurant, for example, to offer a free product if they come back in a certain time frame, so let's say a free bowl of chips, come back in the next month and you get a free bowl of chips with whatever you order. You're starting to build a habit and you're starting to encourage customers to come back, try other products. And I've seen that work to great effect. So thinking a little bit differently, not thinking about how do you better utilize media, but how do you focus on your customer or your prospect and find new ways to connect with them and get them using your product. Again, it's probably something you don't really want to be known for doing, so you'd want to do it sporadically and randomly. I'll finish today with one more rogue brand building story. And we're going to go all the way over to Copenhagen now, where the brand Jeep, which I'm sure you've heard of, have actually spent time creating real parking spaces in zones normally without parking spaces. So they would spray paint parks in unusual areas and write Jeep in the bottom right-hand corner of the park that they just created out of thin air. Not sure how legal this would be in many countries. Not sure if it was even legal there, but they did it. I've seen the photos and I'll attach the links in the description of the episode if you wanted to go have a look yourself. And I think this would work for a couple of reasons. So it gets the attention of people around because the parks are in quite unusual spots, the parks that they just create for themselves. So for example, half the park might be up on a curb and the photos of it look quite strange. And at the time, the brand was also trying to signal that the car can go anywhere. So the inference when you have half the car park on the road, half the car park on the footpath is that this car can go anywhere. Jeeps can go anywhere. So it was really interesting to see those photos. I will put them in the description of the episode for you to check out for yourself. A lot of these examples do focus, no matter the size of the brand, on trying to be a big fish in a small pond, which is an approach that I still think is open to most brands. But what I'd leave you with today is to think more about your customers' lives and how you can insert your brand into their lives meaningfully and not restrict yourself to asking, how do we better reach them within media channels? There really isn't the restrictions on getting our brand out there that we perhaps perceive. I hope this episode gave you ideas. I love rogue brand building strategies. I love rogue brand building in general. If you're doing it the same way as everyone else, you're probably going to get similar results to everyone else. That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. I'll be back in your ears next week with a co-hosted episode with another senior marketer. Please subscribe if you haven't already. If you haven't left a review and you're enjoying the episodes, please leave one. I'd really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.